Welcome to another episode of Convicts and Cops. Today's topic will focus on Robert Rio Sosa, also known as Babo from Santa Bruta, who would become the first Nuestra Familia General. Of Puerto Rican descent, Babo lived in California cities with a predominant Mexican culture and assimilated into the Chicano street and prison gang family. Despite having lived in the California cities of Santa Barbara and San Diego, today considered Sureño and Mexican Mafia strongholds, Babo would join the Nuestra Familia. Babo would become very instrumental in ushering in a reign of terror with an unknown number of murders conducted under his leadership. Before we begin, allow me to share with you all a quick word from our sponsor. No good tree bears bad fruit, nor does a bad tree bear good fruit. Each tree is recognized by its own fruit. People do not pick figs from thornbushes, or grapes from briars. This comes from Matthew 7:18. Robert Rio Sosa was born on February 20th, 1945, in Santa Barbara to parents Julio and Gloria Sosa. Babo was born and raised in Santa Barbara and is pictured here in his 1959 Santa Barbara Junior High School 8th grade yearbook. Babo enjoyed playing basketball, and this picture is taken from the same 1959 yearbook featuring the school's basketball team. Babo became interested in cars, and this would lead to run-ins with law enforcement. On September 27, 1963, Babo's hometown newspaper reported that he was fined $3 in the local traffic court for having a modified exhaust system on his vehicle. Babo's love for cars was inherited from his dad, Julio Sosa Sr. His father owned an auto body shop named Julio's Custom Shop. As you can see from the Santa Barbara directory, both Babo and his younger brother Julio worked at their father's shop. Babo's younger brother was named after their father, so he was Julio Rio Sosa Jr., who also became known in the gang world as Buggy Sosa. By 1965, Babo's license had been suspended, but this didn't stop him from cruising in his car. On February 23, 1965, his hometown newspaper again reported on his involvement with the local traffic court. Babo was fined $110 and given 90 days in jail for driving on a suspended license. His involvement with law enforcement would not only continue, but the repercussions would become more serious. The ever so subtle turns in life can often rear their ugly heads when the progression of lawbreaking continues its proliferating journey. An otherwise normal kid can evolve into something virtually unrecognizable. Sometimes the opposite can occur. On June 19, 1965, Babo, his older brother John Sosa, and his younger brother Julio Buggy Sosa were arrested for the burglary of Victor's grocery store located on 535 East de la Guerra Street. Unfortunately for Babo and Buggy, they not only love cars, but they also love shooting black. Booze, pills, marijuana, and hard drugs was considered the escalation or graduation in the enjoyment of drug use in the gang world. This love of the dragon, one of many affectionate names given to heroin, would later claim Buggy's life when he died of an overdose on February 8, 1997, in San Diego, California. The love of the carga would also lead to Babo and Buggy's commitment to the California Department of Corrections. I actually served time with both of them in San Quentin in approximately 1970-1971. I was there between 70 and 75, actually. On September 14, 1966, Babo was arrested again on suspicion of burglary. He was taken into custody by police and sheriff's officers and charged with a burglary at the home of Dr. Robert S. Puz. Under questioning, Babo confessed to committing 13 burglaries in the Santa Barbara area. He would suffer multiple convictions resulting from this crime spree and was sent to the CDC, the California Department of Corrections. Babo's adult criminal career would thus begin in late 1966 behind the walls of Soledad State Prison, directly dovetailing with the founding of the Nuestra Familia prison gang. So let's briefly discuss the existing prison dynamics at the time of Babo's entry into the California penal system. I was already a DVI myself as a California Youth Authority ward. So let's backtrack just a little bit here. In 1957 at the Dual Vocational Institution, a 17-year-old inmate from the Hawaiian Garden street gang in LA by the name of Luis Güero Buff Flores was the instigator and brainchild of forming the Gang of Gangs. His vision was to bring together the cream of the crop, the leaders of the Mexican gang underworld behind the walls. These carnales, Spanish slang for brothers, would join hands and bury the street rivalry hatchets rather than going at each other as gang politics dictated. The newly formed gang then leveraged their power base to take what they wanted and enjoy the small creature comforts, both legal and illegal, available in prison, so they could do easy time. The Mexican Mafia was born. They began to mature. They sought to take over all the rackets in prison, formalize their code of conduct, their reglas complete with a death oath, and became the power behind the walls. The Mexican Mafia's rise to power didn't go unnoticed. In 1965, a second group of Chicanos, also predominantly from Southern and Central California cities, came together at Soledad Prison. Desiring a piece of the pie, these men formed the second prison gang to come into existence inside the California Department of Corrections. The popular narrative over time, also known as recruitment propaganda, is that the Nuestra Familia Mexicana, as the gang was originally named, was formed as protection against the Mafia's predatory practices. This for sure played a role as they recognized that the MA was an equal opportunity exploiter. But the founders also wanted to replicate the Mariposa's success of generating money on the yard, demanding respect, and commanding fear. Why not? These were bad boys who possessed the same gangster DNA as their MA counterparts. They too wanted their issue. The original NF founders are recognized by the prison underworld and gang investigators to be Little John Valdez from Little Valley, Freddy Gonzalez from San Diego, Bruce Güero Morgan from Clanton, and Gonzalo Chalo Hernandez from Bakersfield. The first constitution or organizational structure is referred to as the Padre system, which was a vertically integrated organizational structure utilizing family member titles for positions of rank versus the second constitution that also was a vertically integrated organizational structure arranged along military lines. In the Padre system, each prison had its independent chain of command, while the second constitution set up one chain of command for the entire prison system. Little John was the first boss, or padre, of the new prison gang. It was only a matter of time before the Nuestra Familia and Mexican Mafia came into conflict. This took place at San Quentin in an event known as the 1968 Shoe War. Some of the MS' earliest victims had been fellow Chicano inmates. 3 separate attacks on fellow Chicanos by the Mafia led to the outbreak of open hostilities between the two groups. On February 4th, 1968, James Sonny Peña from Eloyo Maravilla was stabbed to death on San Quentin's upper yard, suffering 3 wounds to the chest with 1 pierced in his heart. Sonny Peña was engaged in the drug business and had not lived up to his commitment to the M. The hit was assigned and carried out by Robert Robot Salas from Big Hazard and Frankie Chivo Buelna from Merced, who would later become known as Frankie B from Primera Flats. In the Sonny Peña incident, Chivo participated as a lookout and backup hitter. Robot, a newly made member, made his bones on this hit. He would also go on to raise his hand for Frankie B and sponsor him into the Mexican Mafia. This homicide was another insult to the Maravilla prison convicts who had suffered under the M's reign of terror. They agreed to join hands with the NF against their common threat in La M. Most notable was former Mexican Mafia member Luis Araujo from Eloyo Maravilla, who was also Sonny Peña's homeboy. So this murder was followed by an attack on March 2nd, 1968. Philip Rebel Neri from Bakersfield and fellow homeboy of Nuestra Familia co-founder Chalo Hernandez was attacked on the San Quentin yard by M. prospect Richard Mosca Solis and Pedro Bogus Pete Nunez. Neri was stabbed in the back and abdomen and nearly died. Steve Calote Amador called that hit because Neri was overheard making disparaging remarks about the Mexican Mafia. Like Robot's hit on Sonny Peña, this murder assignment was given to Mosca Solis to make his bones into La M. Unlike Robot, Mosca did not succeed in sending this man to Brazil. The straw that broke the camel's back took place on Saturday, September 14, 1968. Robot appeared on the San Quentin yard wearing a new pair of dress shoes, acquired and received from his street crime partner and fellow M. brother, Carlos Pieface Ortega. Pieface had ripped off the shoes from Hector Mad Dog Padilla's cell. Hector was an inmate from San Jose. Mad Dog confronted Robot and demanded his shoes or offered to meet with Robot the next day for a head-up confrontation. Robot didn't wait. At the next unlock, Robot entered Mad Dog's cell and began stabbing him. Mad Dog's cell partner, Manuel Menito Romero, probably saved his life when he came to his assistance. He was also stabbed, but both men survived. The Nuestra Familia and other Mexicans made immediate plans to move against the Mexican Mafia as a result of this incident. On Sunday, September 15, 1968, a series of attacks on the 4 remaining Mexican Mafia members in the general population took place. Those who remained on the line were Ramon Ponchi Amado from Mateo, Howard Capi Pacini from Hawaiian Gardens, Manuel Tati Torres from La Rana, and Ruben Sapo Valdez from Wilmas. 8 convicts would suffer injuries and 1 was murdered. The single murder took place in South Block's D section. As the attacks began to unfold on September 15, 1968, guards locked a large group of convicts into D section to prevent them from joining the attacks. Some of those convicts gathered at the steel door trying to get a glimpse of the ongoing attacks. Archie Cricket Gallego from Diamond Street, a Mexican Mafia sympathizer, voiced his opinion and stated that the Nuestra Familia were cowards for attacking the Mexican Mafia when most of them were locked up instead of confronting them when they were heavily on the yard. Whoops! He was overheard by 3 NF members who were also locked in D section, unable to participate in the attacks. The 3 NF members included Babo Sosa, Thomas Pollo Montoya from San Jose, and Martin Marty Agüero from Oakland. They pounced on him. Pollo and Marty held Cricket while Babo stabbed him with a half pair of black-handled scissors that were later recovered in a cell used as a common toilet for the convicts in D section. Officer Leo G. Davis, who would a few years later be stabbed to death by the Black Guerrilla family, sounded the alarm at 2 p.m. when he discovered Cricket lying on his back holding the left side of his chest covered in blood. Officer Moore observed Marty giving Pollo a clean pair of pants and shirt. Both men were apprehended. A bloody shirt was found under the bench that Pollo was sitting on. A body search revealed Pollo had a leg stab wound. He was taken to the hospital and Marty was placed in segregation. Babo escaped undetected. The Nuestra Familia would assume control of San Quentin, and the Mexican Mafia was not allowed to walk the line at the Big Q for the next 2 years. From Sergeant Hankins' autobiography in the book Alpha Guard, it has been revealed that Chalo Hernandez, Freddy Gonzalez, and Black Jesse Valenzuela collaborated with Hankins to identify and keep Mexican Mafia members in lockup units and off the yard. There is zero evidence, information, or reports that Babo was also collaborating with Sergeant Hankins. In my opinion, had Babo been made aware of the 3 NF snitches, regardless of their lofty status of being NF co-founders, he would have been the first to initiate the immediate termination of the collaborators. All crime groups experience bad apples embedded within their ranks, and you can never hold a criminal organization responsible for those within whom are not known to the rank and file. That's just life in the big city, as they say. Having committed the only murder in the Familia's confrontation against the hated and dreaded Mexican Mafia, Babo's status was very elevated, to say the least. Babo kept busy. On June 6, 1971, a Native American dance show was being held on San Quentin's lower yard. Sometime during this performance, inmate Stephen Kovac was fatally stabbed in the back near his spine. Prison officials did not observe the altercation and only became aware of the dead man when a prisoner brought their attention to Kovac's body on the ground. Although no suspects were reported, CDC documents and classified reports later revealed the suspects as NF members Manuel Bozo Torres and Babo Sosa. With 2 fatal notches under his belt, Babo was propelled to the top of the gang's food chain. Babo did not go unnoticed when the Nuestra Familia heavyweights decided to reorganize under their second constitution. In a criminal court proceeding, Nuestra Familia defector Abundio Padilla testified he had met Death Row Joe Gonzalez in San Quentin in 1972. He stated that Death Row Joe and another NF member named Robert Medina, a.k.a. Daira from San Fernando, were drafting a new constitution complete with bylaws to reorganize the NF. Following the murder of MM member Rudy Cheyenne Cadena in Palm Hall, Chino, on December 17, 1972, Frank Joker Mendoza from Redondo, Juan Manzanas Colon from New York, and NF associate Raymond Tiny Contreras from San Jose had been indicted and were being tried for Shai's murder. They subpoenaed fellow NF members to Palm Hall to discuss the new constitution. According to Padilla, those members were Daira Medina, Death Row Joe, Manuel Bozo Torres, and Babo Sosa. It was at this place and time Death Row offered Babo the position of Nuestro General, which he accepted. Death Row Joe was appointed first captain. Daira Medina became second captain. By July 1973, the new constitution had been adopted. The first order of business under the new constitution was to create a hit list. After the lopsided results of the 1972 war against the Mexican Mafia, the new high command of the Nuestra Familia also proceeded in conducting a series of internal house cleanings. They began by identifying the dead weight inside the NF to target for execution. The NF suffered from quality control issues during this period. This was touched upon by several of their defectors, including Death Row Joe and Arthur Rock Beltran, among others. After the War of 1972, with M sent to Folsom and San Quentin, NF designated to DVI in Soledad, this became the perfect time to purge the ranks and thereby strengthen themselves. Placing fear within the O was also intended to strengthen the NF. Babo issued targeted hits on 3 familianos he considered to be traitors. The 3 immediate targets were Michael Fat Mike Rodriguez, Manuel Manito Garza, and Michael Pollo Cunha. Michael Fat Mike Rodriguez was marked for execution for cowardice. According to the autobiography of NF member Fig Avlios, Fat Mike and 3 other familianos were housed in a dorm at Susanville. On October 4th, 1972, Fat Mike was assigned to watch the door leading into the dorm for any approaching enemies or trouble. He observed 2 emeros approaching, and instead of warning the others, he ran away. Doroteo Sleepy Betancourt from Calexico and Eddie Pelon Moreno from Norwalk were both experienced killers and entered the dorm, brutally executing NF members Frank Diamond Miranda and Richard Bullwinkle Medina. Fat Mike was murdered by fellow familianos Fernando Sapo Yanez and Robert Pájaro Rocha on August 25, 1973 at DVI. The next member to be moved on was Manuel Manito Garza. He was stabbed by Frank Chito Sanchez but survived the attack. Nuestra Familia member Michael Pollo Cunha from Salinas was next in line to be taken out. He was attacked by fellow familianos Michael Peanuts Villasana and William Oso Romo. He too would survive the attempt to terminate his life, although he would be minus 1 eye. What can I tell you, my friend? You live to enjoy another day on earth. All 3 hits took place at DVI as the Nuestra Familia now became a killing machine. In July 1975, Babo paroled from Soledad to San Diego. Apparently, his mother had relocated there from Santa Barbara to be near her recently married daughter. Like most families, there were always innocent relatives who were not part of the game we played. You can't ask a family, especially a mother, to abandon a loved one. Love the sinner, hate the sin, is a saying that comes to mind. Babo was a sinner, so what? We all are. 1975 was also the year that Death Row Joe wrote the street subdivisions of the Nuestra Familia Constitution. The NF became very active on the street, and both law enforcement and the press took note. Babo didn't last long on the streets. On November 7th, 1975, Babo was at a local bar enjoying a drink. He and another bar patron left the bar to walk to Keith's restaurant at about 11:30 p.m. But before they arrived to the restaurant, Babo pulled out a gun and robbed the man of $25. At 12:55 a.m., a sailor from the USS Ranger walked to his car parked in the 700 block of National Avenue. When the sailor entered the vehicle, he rolled the window down and Babo pointed a gun at him. The sailor was relieved of his wallet that contained $140. Babo was later found by police hiding in a ditch that runs parallel to Roosevelt Avenue. Babo pled to 1 count of armed robbery and a 2nd count was dismissed. He was sentenced to serve a sentence of 10 years to life. Upon his return to the CDC, Babo was reunited with his first captain, Death Row Joe, at the Correctional Training Facility in Soledad. One noteworthy observation I can share with you regarding Babo Sosa and Death Row Joe. For a few years back in the day, wherever these 2 guys traveled inside the California prison system, death was sure to follow. These 2 were probably the most prolific NF shot callers in their 60-year history. These 2 vatos specialized in directing homicides on the outside and in other prisons like no other familianos that have come down the pike since. On October 17, 1976, Richard Cano Hernandez was murdered at the Correctional Training Facility in Soledad, California, commonly referred to as Chole by Chicano convicts. Prior to the murder, Nuestra Familia member Rudy Quilon was housed in Soledad's maximum security O-Wing alongside Babo Sosa and Death Row Joe Gonzalez. This is where Quilon received the order to kill Hernandez for not taking care of familia business. The order originated from Babo and DR. Babo provided Quilon with a picture of Hernandez, and Death Row Joe told Quilon to contact Rudy Del Real for assistance. On the day Quilon was released from O-Wing to the general population, he contacted Del Real, who shared cell D118 in Soledad Central Facilities D-Wing with Hernandez. Quilon even threatened Del Real, telling him that if he didn't move on Hernandez with him, the familia would send word to the streets to hit his family. Del Real had little choice and agreed to help. On October 17, 1976, Quilon accompanied Del Real and Hernandez back to their cell after dinner. Quilon smoked some marijuana and Hernandez injected some carga. Hernandez became ill and Quilon started strangling him with some wire, while Del Real stabbed him. Del Real dropped the knife and Quilon picked it up and stabbed Hernandez a few more times. At approximately 6:40 p.m., Hernandez let out a muffled cry for help that was overheard by a guard. The guard responded and shined his light into the cell and saw Quilon and Del Real pushing Hernandez under the bunk. The day after the murder, Quilon and Death Row received visits. Quilon was able to provide Death Row a report on the murder as the two walked back to their cells. Death Row responded, "All right, right on. We'll see you when you get up to Tracy." On May 4th, 1977, Quilon and Del Real pled guilty to second-degree murder. Later, Quilon dropped out of the familia and testified against Babo and Death Row. Babo and Death Row together instituted a reign of terror, ordering an untold number of murders and assaults. In my personal estimation, this was the zenith or high water mark of the Nuestra Familia. The massive number of murders, especially the internal hits, would take a toll on many of the members. It would ultimately contribute big time to the downfall of Babo Sosa, Death Row Joe, and the Nuestra Familia as the wrecking machine they were in their heyday. On February 8, 1978, Death Row Joe and Babo Sosa were indicted in Salinas Municipal Court. On March 7, 1978, they were again indicted by the Monterey County Grand Jury on the same 8 counts filed in the Salinas Municipal Court. They were charged with conspiracy to commit murder and murder for the executions of Gloria Rice, Alejandro Knuckles Moreno, Richard Cano Hernandez, and Edward Thomas Serna. Nuestra Familia runner, messenger Clara Imperial was indicted on 1 count of conspiracy and murder for passing on the Gloria Rice execution orders. On February 27, 1979, at the conclusion of the trial, Death Row Joe was convicted on 3 counts of first-degree murder and conspiracy and sentenced to 3 consecutive terms of 7 to life for the murders of Gloria Rice, Alejandro Moreno, and Richard Cano Hernandez. The murder of Edward Thomas Serna was dropped due to lack of evidence. Babo Sosa was convicted on 1 count of murder and conspiracy for ordering the murder of Richard Cano Hernandez, but he was acquitted for the murders of Gloria Rice and Alejandro Moreno. Clara Imperial was convicted on 1 count of murder and conspiracy for the murder of Gloria Rice. All the internal killings, law enforcement pressure, and convictions put pressure on the Nuestra Familia membership. The decisions being made by the High Command began to be questioned. Furthermore, questions began to be raised about the money being generated and held in the Nuestra Familia Bank. Death Row Joe was stripped of his status and placed under investigation by Babo. Death Row saw the writing on the wall and dropped out in March of 1978. Not long after this, Robert Black Bob Vasquez from Gilroy began the impeachment process to remove Babo from his position as the familia's Nuestro General. And the law wasn't done with Babo yet. On December 8th, 1978, a second indictment was unsealed in San Joaquin County. Babo Sosa, Death Row Joe, Felix Fig Avlios, and Lawrence Perico Saldivar were charged in a 9-count indictment for conspiracy and the murders of Jerry Miranda Blanco, Rodney Hollingworth, Morris Needham, Danilo Melendez, Robert Consul, Randy Allen Roth, Edward Gwynn, and Michael Rodriguez. All were killed in DVI except for Blanco. On February 3, 1983, a jury found Babo Sosa guilty of conspiracy to commit murder and the murders of Michael Fat Mike Rodriguez on August 25, 1973, Rand Roth on June 8, 1975, Robert Consul on October 21, 1975, and Daniel B.B. Melendez on April 28, 1977. By 1983, Babo's impeachment was complete. Babo never acknowledged his loss of power and surrounded himself with a few loyal supporters such as Felix Fig Avlios, Richard Din Castro, also known as Casper, Frank Joker Mendoza, and Larry Perico Saldivar. In 1984, Babo and Casper were moved on, in San Quentin, by Black Bob soldiers Nathaniel Rooster Givens, Henry Diamond Hank Cortez, and Eddie Lilo Crackers. Although they failed to kill Babo and Casper, they did succeed in removing them from GP, general population, in effect keeping them from ever walking the line. Babo and the Nuestra Familia also became the first prison gang to be prosecuted under the RICO statute. On January 19, 1982, 25 current and former Nuestra Familia members were charged by a Fresno federal grand jury under a federal racketeering indictment for murder, extortion, robbery, and drug trafficking. But this was overkill. Babo had already been convicted on 2 counts of conspiracy to commit murder and 5 murder counts in the previous 2 trials. He was serving all day and would never see the streets again. Babo lived in exile from the gang he once led and died on December 7th, 1993, at the young age of 48 from cancer. Think about this. At the age of 37, he was already facing the remainder of his natural life behind bars. Plus, he was targeted for execution by the same guys he once had dominion over. Unable to completely enjoy the fruits of his criminal labor, what kind of life is that? Consider Babo Sosa when you share his story with your homeboys, whether they be norteños or sureños. Babo Sosa, rest his soul, is another example that there is no pot of gold waiting for you at the end of the rainbow in that doomed life. Take it from me. No, strike that. Take it from Babo Sosa. Only a cement box in a state or federal prison is your destiny and your future prospect for your existence. Or there's a pine box prepared somewhere for your corpse when your premature number is called. Your choice, Chingon. There was a street and prison saying we had that went like this: you better check yourself before you wreck yourself. Amen to that. Hermanos y hermanas, brothers and sisters, think long and hard before getting involved in that life. If you're deep in the doo-doo already, it's never too late to pull out. Remember the thief on the cross. Good night, and God bless you.